Summer is just around the corners. Today I want to walk around the garden, show you the spring garden as we approach summer and all the delicious summer crops that I have growing right now. Made a lot of changes in the garden, in particular on this side. You'll notice that I have fresh wood chip mulch, I have new trellises, even a new bed in the back there. I've actually done a lot of work over here. It turns out this entire garden was being invaded by tree roots, which I have now taken care of temporarily, and we'll see if this garden actually responds well. So right off the bat, over here I have my pepper bed. This is just a mix of peppers. There's some ahi peppers, some Fresno peppers, a couple sweet peppers. And on this side, I also put a little summer squash. I like having summer squash close to the kitchen door over here because it grows so fast in the summer that if you miss it, you end up with a gigantic squash like that. So my goal is to try to harvest it a little bit more regularly. Now, behind me, I have planted tomatoes. This is a bed where I have struggled in the past with root knot nematode. But what I've done here is I've actually been using French marigolds. I planted a bunch of them over the winter. I also have been using neem cake meal. Turns out that neem cake meal is really good at dealing with root knot nematodes. And the other thing I wanted to point out right now is that tomatoes look really good. They look super healthy across my entire garden. So on this side, I have a net trellis where I have 2 tomatoes. These are cherry tomatoes, which I'm letting entirely go crazy. I'm not really removing many suckers. So this is just 1 tomato plant here. I have another tomato plant here. This is my sauce tomato, and they're just gonna fill out the net throughout the season. Now down here on my right is one of the other beds that I've rebuilt. I rebuilt all 3 of these in-ground beds. By rebuilt, I mean I forked them, I amended them, I kind of reset the irrigation a little bit, and I also replanted them. So on this side, what you're looking at is I have some metal hoops here and some frost cloth because I've been covering this okra to try to get it to grow a little bit faster. So the reason why I cover my okra here is because in San Diego, we get something called May gray and June gloom, which is when the coastal air kind of rolls in, blankets us, and blocks out a lot of the sun. So early summer is actually quite cool for us, and okra is a heat-loving plant, and it needs as much heat as possible if you want it to grow. So that is why I'm covering it. It is growing a little bit, so I'm very happy to see that. But at the end of this bed, I've also shoved in a random cherry tomato. You'll see a lot of tomatoes throughout this tour because they are by far my favorite plant. Now, behind me, what I've done is I've actually planted some sorrel here. And this is like one of the most incredible plants. It grows like nobody's business. It's tripled, quadrupled, quintupled in size. I keep cutting it back. I'm even using the leaves as mulch there. You could see some dead, dying leaves. Just because it's growing so fast, I can't even use it all, so I'm now mulching. Now the purpose of this trellis here will be to grow cucumbers. I actually see a couple baby cucumber seedlings that have just emerged. So in a month or 2, I should start getting some cucumbers out of this bed, and I'm very excited for it. Now on this side, I have my grape. This is a grape that has struggled a lot in the past, in particular with powdery mildew. The frustrating thing for me is that it has plenty of airflow here. There's not really much crowding. Of course, the tree collards here are crowding a little bit, so I'll need to cut those back a little bit. But last year what happened was that all of these grapes got powdery mildew. They got onto the grapes themselves, and what happens is that it cracks the grapes and ruins them. So you can't even eat them, even though it's just a little bit of mildew on the surface, because they are now cracked all the way through. So what I'm planning on doing is, see, like right here, I have this leaf that seems to have a little bit of disease damage. I'm going to be removing it. Last year I didn't do any pruning whatsoever on my grape, but this year I'm planning on removing any old leaves before they get a chance to get diseased, and hopefully that'll help reduce the amount of disease pressure on my grape. Now, besides that, I have some carrots over here that have gone to flower. So this is a carrot flower. They're very lovely looking. The pollinators love them. They'll be absolutely covered. And then I'll save the seeds from this because fresh carrot seed will germinate in something like 5 to 10 days instead of like 2 weeks. So it's very fun to make and save your own seed because it's actually much easier to grow your own home-saved carrot seed. Now, in front of me, I have the Shasta daisy. This is a gigantic plant. The first year I had it, it was literally like this wide, maybe wider. So I've trimmed it back a lot. It is starting to bloom. I love the blooms. They last for such a long time. They're so profuse, and they do actually attract quite a bit of pollinators. So I can't wait to see this thing fully bloomed out, but it is at least on the way. I'm very excited to see it. Now, this is the new raised bed here in the garden. This is our cedar line raised bed. This is the large in-ground one. So it's basically 4 by 8 feet. And right now, the way I'm using it is I'm growing tomatoes on the back on this redwood trellis that I built. And up front here, I have entirely bush beans, 3 different varieties of bush beans, because bush beans are something that haven't really done well in my in-ground garden here after the first year. So we're pretty convinced that we had some contaminated straw, that maybe had some persistent herbicide, and that is why we couldn't grow beans in ground anymore, because the first year was incredible. Every year after that, they just seemed to like languish and die and not really produce any beans. So fresh soil in a raised bed, not the old ground, they should do just fine. I can't wait to get fresh green beans from the garden again. So tomatoes, I have a Sun Gold, I have a Cherokee Purple. These are my 2 favorites. I have a whole lot of beans. And then this little strip over here what I'm actually doing is turning this into a new pollinator patch. I'm trying to do mostly natives, but I'll do that over time. So for now, what I have is some Lacey Phacelia. So this is an orchard that I put in at the start of spring. And it's kind of interesting because I have two apples here. I have a Fuji and a Pink Lady. Now these are both apples that technically, according to Chill Hours, should not do well in my climate, but I've heard reports of other people who tried them anyway, and apparently they did really well. So Chill Hours, kind of like a pseudoscience almost. It is a science, there is a real number behind it, but I don't think it really necessarily means you won't get a harvest. You just might not get an insane harvest. I'm willing to try it for delicious apples because the only other apples that are really listed for San Diego are Anna's apples, and they're just honestly not that good, and Golden Dorset, they just don't excite me. So these are two apples that excite me. I really hope that they actually do work and develop apples because that would be fantastic. But the other thing I've done here is I actually thought all my asparagus died. Apparently it had not died. It's now coming back up. So I guess I'm gonna leave it and try to do an orchard asparagus situation. But the other cool thing I've added in here, yeah, there it is. I have two native strawberries. These are woodland strawberries. I put a bunch over here, a bunch over there. They should sprawl through this whole area and become sort of a permaculture-like guild with the asparagus and the fruit trees. The native strawberries are very small. They're not going to be like a gigantic fruit. They'll be like a little blueberry-sized fruit. But if they do develop, they will be actually quite good. Now, besides these two apple trees, the orchard also has a pomegranate over here. This is a smaller one called Parfianca that was like in a 1-gallon pot. And then behind this really beautiful sunflower here. Take a look at that. Love the sunflowers this year. They're all looking really good. I have a Texas pink pomegranate. So this is one from our trees, the ones that we sell direct online. And it is loaded in flowers. I'm not removing them. This did come potted, so it was not bare root, which allowed me to leave the flowers. Because if it is bare root, you really shouldn't let it flower because there's just not enough root mass to support it. But since this was potted, it had plenty of roots. I decided to let it rip, and I'm hoping they'll actually get a couple harvests out of here. Now, I'm not gonna let all the flowers develop because that's too heavy of a fruit load for a tree this young, but I definitely will be getting at least 1 or 2 fruit off of that, and I'm very excited for it. Now, over here is an area where I've had eggplant historically for a long period of time. I actually would overwinter them in ground in the same bed year after year. They have grown maybe 4 to 5 times in size since I planted them out only like 3 weeks ago. And they already have flowers. So I think it's going to be a wonderful eggplant year. And I'm very excited for that because they just look incredible. And I will be overwintering and leaving these in ground for every year from now on, at least for another 2 or 3 years like I did the first time. Now, the last thing on this bed over here are my slicing tomatoes. Now, this year, instead of doing a single leader, which is where you just train a single stem on a single piece of string, I've done the double leader system. I found that this actually produces better overall. You still get the benefit of airflow because you're not having too much crowding and branching, but 2 liters is very easy for the plant to support a bunch of fruit versus a single liter. And right here, you could see just how loaded it is with fruit. Each one of the branches is now setting off a bunch of clusters. I have a Cherokee Purple, a Big Beef, and then over here I have a Cherokee Carbon, and they're all looking wonderful, all looking healthy, and they're all starting to set abundant fruit. So this year is going to be the year of tomatoes, and I cannot wait for it because they're absolutely my favorite plant. Now on the end here is my perennial kale. This kale has now been in the garden over 3 years. It's coming on to its 4th year being in the exact same spot, which is why it looks so funky. It's like so dense and bushy. There's all these crazy little branches that are forming. Because all I do is that when it bolts, I just chop it down and let it regrow from the stump. And this is what you get. You get a kale that you basically never have to water because it has a crazy root system. And you get really delicious kale that has tons of flavor, also thanks to that root system. Now behind me, you'll also probably see a little bit of sweet peas. I planted a whole bunch of sweet peas here, some beets, a little bit of greens. But I want to show you guys something I don't show you guys very often, which are actually the native gardens. I put in a native garden behind me over there, I think now over a year ago, but we also built a new one just recently that you guys haven't seen any of whatsoever. So now let's take a quick look at the native gardens before I show you the rest of my vegetable garden, and that side is my favorite by far. So a couple things are going on here. There's actually a lot of things going on, I should say, because up front here, first of all, we have the blueberries, which are incredible right now. They're loaded up with hundreds of berries. They're absolutely delicious. We've been eating them for weeks. One of the cool things I didn't realize about blueberries is that when you have them, they don't just all ripen at once. They ripen over like a month or 2. So you get snacks in the garden every single day. And it's actually making me want to add 2 to 4 to 6 extra more blueberries because of how good they are. But we're here to talk about the native garden. So let me show you guys a couple things. First of all, if you're wondering what this absolute beast is here, that is the white sage. This is a plant that we bought this big. It's only been in the garden now for a year. And just look at this. It's covered in bees, both native bees and honeybees. It smells wonderful. It's so sticky and resinous and aromatic that it's all over my hands now, and I'm not even mad about it. But wonderful plant. This is the white sage. I have some black sage down here, some hummingbird sage, a native morning glory, which actually just flowered. Now, if you don't know, morning glory can be a little bit invasive, but we're not too worried about it because it is native and we're planting it in the native garden. Now, my favorite though, the one that I'm most excited for, is this manzanita. It's grown quite a lot. I'd say this has probably doubled in size in the year that we've had it as well. And it's just looking wonderful. I love the color of the bark here. I like it when it turns red, it starts flaking. And the flowers are actually really wonderful when they do happen. And right underneath the manzanita is one of my new favorites. This is an endemic to San Diego, although there are ones that are across California. It's called the Yerba Buena. It smells like mint, but it's like a very deep mint. It's very wonderful, aromatic. We use it in drinks. It's a great ground cover. And actually it has a lot of little flowers that I just saw a native bee hanging out on. So wonderful for the pollinators, wonderful for the garden. It just smells so good in here. I love the native garden. This is just one of 2 native gardens that we built here. On the way over to the other native garden, I just remembered I have my curing table set up. I figured I'd show you guys, and I'll tell you exactly where these onions came from in the garden. But right now they're about halfway through their curing process. This is almost fully dry here. We're waiting for the roots to turn hard, for the neck to be entirely devoid of moisture. But I have quite a nice little layout of onions this year. Next year I'm going to double it, maybe even more. And I haven't harvested all the garlic yet, but some of my elephant garlic in particular is quite massive. So I'll show you the rest of the garlic in a moment, but now let's go take a look at that other native garden that I've never shown you guys at all. So here we are over in the new native garden. This is a native garden we built right outside our bedroom, and I'm very excited for it. It looks really, really nice. I have some pitcher sage. I have a lot of different types of yarrow. Even have a native fern here to San Diego. This one's also really cool. It's called coyote mint. It's similar to that Yerba Buena in that you could use it as a mint and it smells absolutely delicious. And I just noticed it's almost flowering and I can't wait to see that bloom. Now, one of my favorite things that we've added though are the ceanothus. I have a small one here that's trailing, but this guy is already in full bloom and it's already bloomed twice. So this is going to end up being a quite large bush covered in wonderful blue flowers every spring. And the idea behind this is that most of these plants are actually not only native to California, but they're endemic to San Diego, meaning that they're only in San Diego. So this is a great way to add plenty of native plants, which will attract native pollinators, native insects, birds, and all sorts of other wonderful life to our garden. And it doesn't have to interfere with the rest of the actual edible garden in the background. Now, the cool thing is that sometime later this year, we're probably going to put a water feature here. And we're thinking of actually adding a little stream that goes all the way through the native garden. So we'll talk about that more at the end of this year. But now let's take a look at the actual vegetable garden, because this one's my favorite. I have to say, this side of my vegetable garden is my absolute favorite. It's so lush. I've planted it early enough that I'm starting to get harvest out of here. In particular, on this side, this is where I actually got all those onions that I just showed you guys. So this was all onion bed. I am going to be turning it over into more tomatoes so I can complete my tomato bed here. But what I have going so far is I have 4 slicing tomatoes, 4 cherry tomatoes. This is all on the Florida weave. They're growing quite nicely. Again, I'm pruning them very, very regularly. So you can see at the very bottom here, the bottom 1.5 feet, literally there are no leaves growing there because I've removed them entirely. What you'll also see is that I'm starting to get a lot of really, really wonderful fruit set. Every single plant has at least half dozen tomatoes or so, and these are all big slicers. On the back, I actually ate my first sun gold tomato fresh out of the garden yesterday. So it's a great sign that summer is actually here. And I just realized I forgot to show you guys my pride and joy this year, which is my sunflower, because this is the biggest sunflower that I've ever grown. I'm gonna stand underneath it for scale. And the reason why this sunflower got this big is because I seeded it directly into the ground. It was not a transplant. And I actually put it right where all the rainwater from my greenhouse drains into the garden. So it's the wettest portion of my yard by far because it has all that rainwater in there. And sunflowers love having a bunch of water. If you give them infinite water, they will grow to as big as they could possibly get. And that is exactly what you're seeing here, a gigantic branching sunflower, and I love to see it. So again, on the backside here, one of my favorite plants that you guys always ask about is the Pride of Madera. Right now it is on its way out in terms of blooms. There are a couple secondary blooms on the way, but I still love the way it looks. Even after the blooms have faded, they still have this nice green color, a lot of texture, and there's just a last little bit of blooming happening here. There's a bee trying to get to that flower right as I pointed to it. So I love to see it. I will be pruning it back this year to try to get it to flower even heavier. But one thing I wanted to call out here is this tree right here. This is my 3-in-1 grafted peach tree that I showed you guys in my video, how to get a fruit tree to grow faster using the multi-hole method. And this was a bare root tree. So it had like 4 little chunks of roots, little branches, and this is the massive amount of growth we got just this year. I have no flowers set, which is fantastic because I don't want to set any fruit in the first year of a bare fruit tree. But next year, I will be letting it fruit because just look how much growth we got in the time period of just a few months. I am confident that the roots are now spreading very deeply throughout this area, and it should be a fantastic peach year next year and every year after that. Now at the base here is actually something unique that I built. This is an in-ground hugelkultur mound. So traditionally the hugelkultur style beds that we talk about are in the tall raised beds, but this one was built the traditional style, in ground with lots of logs, a lot of woody material. I just harvested a bunch of wheat out of this, and I'm actually planning now of reseeding this with a Three Sisters style garden. So I'm gonna do 3 rows of sweet corn in the middle and the sides here, and I'll be planting beans all around it and maybe a squash or 2 on either end to let that spread through my garden. So I'm very excited to get that going. I need to seed that today, but I also want to call your attention to this wonderful bed back here, which is my potato bed. I've never actually grown potatoes in a raised bed. I've always had them in containers, and I always got some potatoes back, but I never felt like the harvest was really worth the effort. Not that it requires a lot of effort, but it just wasn't ever a huge harvest. It never really felt good. But right here, these are gigantic plants. I only put 6 seed potatoes in here, so you can see all this growth here is just from 6 seed potatoes. They've already set their flowers, which means that I should have new potatoes down here. And in fact, I could just reach down into the surface of the soil here, and I could harvest a fresh little new potato. So these are the Sarpomiras. I have the little stalk right there where the potato grew out of. And new potatoes are a great delicacy because they're very tender, they're very easy to cook, and the skin is even just coming off from me touching it. So I'm gonna put this in my back pocket and maybe snack on it later. But I can't wait to harvest all those potatoes because it's going to be an incredible amount of potatoes. Now on the raised bed front, I have the large birdies beds here with a squash. I also have a couple eggplant in here. And then back here, this is mostly a mix of flowers, some chard, some herbs. I have like some oregano in there, some mountain tea down here, the chamomile, the last of it, which I need to actually remove to plant something else. But everything is going really well in the raised beds. I have to say, I am very impressed by how things grow in a raised bed the first year that you built it. When it comes to in-ground gardens, the first year can be a little bit rockier, a little bit rougher to get a really good growth. But in the raised beds, I'm having tremendous success, even on the very first year, we're just putting in new soil. So I love to see that. And I will be probably adding a couple more raised beds, but I just love growing in ground equally as much. Now over here is all hardneck garlic. This is all music variety garlic. And what I've already done is I've come through and removed the scape. The scape is that flower stalk that shoots up from the hardneck garlic. So you can see each one of these has a little cut point missing. And what I'm waiting for here is basically for these plants to have at least half their leaves dead or drying down. So I'll pull one right here. This one looks like it's ready. Oh yeah, so that's a nice little bulb of garlic there. Nothing crazy in size. That's why this one died back a little earlier. It just didn't have the chance to reach the full size. Sometimes that happens, but if I get, even if they're all like this, I would still be perfectly happy. This is a nice little clove of, or head of garlic here. So make sure you wait before you harvest, or else you're just going to be losing size on your garlic. You could harvest it at any time, but if you wait for the right time, you'll get a bigger bulb. So I'm gonna set that aside, come back to that a little bit later, because I wanted to show you guys the peppers here. I did a video this year called How I Get My Peppers to Grow Faster for Free, and here are the results. They have grown quite a lot. I think this one was like down here. It is now essentially doubled in volume, a lot of lower branches coming in. Everything's looking super green and healthy. Even the overwintered ones like this one and the Serrano up there. But all the new ones also look fabulous, and it should be a really nice pepper year. I think this year is really shaping out to be a wonderful year. Everything is healthy so far. I don't see any major diseases. It's been sunnier than usual for May. Usually we get the May gray. So I'm very optimistic this will be maybe the best garden year ever. So at least fingers crossed, that's how I feel right now. I'm gonna carry that energy into the season. Now behind me, I have the wall of sweet peas. These are the Beaujolais sweet peas. They make this really nice sort of dark purple flower, and they do smell really wonderful, like that wonderful classic sweet pea scent. And they are very tall. I didn't actually expect them to get quite this tall. Most sweet peas I get usually cap out around here. So if you're looking for a variety that's tall and has wonderful dark colors, this is the Beaujolais variety. Highly encourage you guys check that out. Now working our way down, we have the last bits of winter here, or I guess maybe spring. I have a couple broccolini plants, a couple little cabbages that are actually ready to harvest, and this Brussels sprout that I keep saying I'm going to remove, and I just haven't. So that guy's gonna come out. I'll be replacing this probably with some sprawling plants because this is a really long, wide bed. I could throw in some pumpkins or watermelons. They have plenty of room to ramble and run around without really interacting with the rest of my garden. Now on the trellis, this used to be entirely passion fruit, but now it is climbing beans and cucumbers. So if you take a look, you'll notice that the cucumbers have really started to grow. Cucumbers are truly a summer plant. They will not grow quickly in cold weather. So what happened was I planted them, they sat there forever, they didn't do much, and now they've actually taken off and they're covered in cucumbers. So I'm very excited to see it. Very excited to see the beans doing well on this trellis. I have hundreds of flowers. It's going to be a really wonderful early bean harvest from these pole beans. And I've actually pulled a few and they've been really tasty so far. Now, again, tomatoes are the major theme of my garden. It is my favorite thing to grow. It's my favorite thing to eat out of the garden. And right here, I have quite the tomato bed. This is a 4x8 foot birdie's bed. I have a Florida weave on this side with indeterminate tomatoes, and on the back, it's almost entirely, or it is entirely determinate tomatoes. I can't even tell you how many plants are in here. It's quite wild. I really shouldn't have done this, but it just ended up turning out this way. And so far, things are looking good. I'll show you in that video where I talk about pruning tomatoes, exactly how I prune this, because it is very dense. It's not very usual for people to grow tomatoes this densely. So definitely check that out if you're curious to see how that works. But the tomatoes, again, looking super healthy, really great. And the only thing left to show you guys here are the last bits of the garden on this side. I have some of my poppies. I have my 4-in-1 plum tree here, which is also starting to set some fruit. And this was a bare root, as well as my 2 pear trees here, which are also starting to look quite nice. So there's a couple of more things I want to show you guys. I want to show you guys the chicken orchard. I also have a Three Sisters garden in the front yard, which has just come up. I want to show you that really quick. Here we are in the area I like to call the chicken orchard. It's actually the outdoor run for my chickens that I planted a fruit tree orchard in because I wanted to use all of their manure to actually fertilize and feed my fruit trees. So over here I have a tiger stripe or panache fig, and just look at the incredible amount of fruit that you're seeing on it. Every branch is equally loaded like this, and there's tons of new healthy growth. I finally got this whole area on irrigation, and the irrigation combined with all the chicken poop is really leading to tremendous growth. An example of tremendous growth is actually this guy right here, which is a dwarf mulberry tree. I actually got these cuttings for free off of Facebook Marketplace 2 years ago. It looked exactly like this. I put it in a pot of soil, rooted it, planted it, and here we are 2 years later. Incredible tree, very fast growing. Mulberries and figs in particular are very easy to root from cuttings. They're very fast to grow. And this is actually producing fruit. It's not, oops, I just dropped them off, which the chickens are now fighting over. But they produce these tiny little mulberries. I'm talking 2 years to get a tree this big. It's so big, it's actually pushing through my roof, and it's even setting fruit at the same time. So definitely check that out if you're looking for a fast growing tree. Just be aware that they have invasive roots. Now, another thing that I've worked on a lot over here is training this fig tree. What I've done is I took some twine attached to a landscape staple, which I sunk in the ground, and that allowed me to force these branches to grow horizontally. So see how this branch is horizontal, semi-horizontal, horizontal. And what that did is it brought the canopy lower. It's allowing these new growths to appear in all the other empty spots, and it's created an entire full tree canopy instead of just a couple spindly branches going straight up too high for me to even harvest. So training trees is something new to me. Fig trees have very forgiving wood. They're a little bit easier to train since they're so springy when they're young, but it's very easy, very manageable to do. You literally just need some twine and a landscape staple like this, and you're off to the races. Now, there's one more garden I want to show you, which is in my front yard, and that is the Three Sisters garden that the beans just emerged from. So here is the front yard milpa or Three Sisters garden. I have flower green Oaxacan corn, so this is going to be turned into tortillas. Over here, I just saw the first couple runner beans starting to emerge, and that's the way this works. Once the corn is 6 inches tall, you plant your beans, then the beans grow attached to the corn, climb up it, and now that the beans have emerged, what I'll do next is actually plant some squash seed to let this whole area get filled up with plants, rambling, and get pumpkins, squash, and beans. I actually have a full video on that. If you look at my Three Sisters garden from last year, you'll see exactly how to do this yourself. Now I do want to show you the greenhouse because there's a lot of interesting things in there. Let's go take a look at that. So here we are in the greenhouse. It's looking quite nice. I have a lot of new things, some old things, starting with the strawberries here, which I've filled in quite nicely. What they're starting to do now is set tons of fruit clusters, flowers, fruit. We've actually harvested at this point at least a few dozen over the past month or so. And what's happening is that they're now mature enough that they're setting runners. So if I have any empty pockets like here, all I do is I take a landscape staple, take the runner, place it on the soil, staple it in, and once that's rooted to the soil, I can cut that off, and now I have a free clone of that strawberry plant to fill in that pocket. Now over here I have the tomato that I planted in the How to Grow Tomatoes in Containers video that went up on Epic Gardening, and you can see just how much it's grown in that short period of time. It looks super happy, super healthy, a lot of flowers on the way, a couple peppers, some eggplants, some squash. One thing I'm really excited to try this year is to grow cucumbers in here. So I have 2 cucumbers that have just emerged. My plan is to put a piece of twine here, run it up into this eyelet hook, and let this cucumber climb across my entire greenhouse. We'll see how that actually works. I've never done it, of course, but it sounds cool. I'm excited to try it. And I do have a lot of guavas in here. Like over here, I have a Malaysian guava, which has this wonderful pink flower. It's also a pink fruit. So I'm very excited to see that it is actually setting right now. A couple other guavas down here at the bottom. I have some turmeric, which is growing really, really wonderfully. And also in the back there, I have 3 pots of ginger. The ginger has also emerged. And this is one of the great things about having the greenhouse is that these plants like heat, they like humidity, they don't necessarily want a lot of sun. So that's why I have them in the corner where they'll get shaded by these bigger plants, but still benefit from the greenhouse's heat and humidity all being contained in here. The rest of the stuff is pretty much all tropical. I have the Barbados cherry, another guava, a pomegranate, and then up here is the mango that Kevin got me. So it does have quite a few fruit. I'll probably thin it down to maybe 3 final fruit once they start sizing up a little bit more. But I think I will get a fruit this year, so that's exciting all on its own. I've never had a homegrown guava of any kind, so very excited to see how that tastes. At the back corner here, I have my indeterminate tomato in my giant tomato cage here. So this guy is also starting to set fruit, looks very healthy, very healthy. It's getting a decent amount of airflow in here. I probably need to run the fan a little bit more to reduce any chance of mildew, but it's massive. It's grown great. It's the same age as all the tomatoes you saw outside. So for reference, you could see just how much it loves growing in the greenhouse. Now, the last thing I'll mention is that I always have more seeds on the way, whether it's tomatoes to replace the onion patch over there, or even a couple flowers, sunflowers. I have some cosmos, marigolds, all sorts of things on the way because you always have to have seedlings ready for summertime because things are starting to go quickly right now. I have those brassicas I need to remove. I have the garlic bed that's going to be freed up. So you have to have some amount of planting ready to cycle in, or of course you could always just run to a nursery. So that is the garden right now as it stands right before summer. I can't wait to have the massive harvest and bounty that this year is going to bring. Everything looks super happy and incredible right now. Love to hear you guys' thoughts, questions, comments. Put them down in the comments. I'll be sure to reply. But thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.